Welcome to Binaryhood, back with another video. Today we'll talk about how to create APIs using Spring Boot. So firstly, let's talk about what an API is. So think of an API like a menu at a restaurant. Imagine you go to a restaurant and you don't go into the kitchen to cook your food. Instead, you sit at the table, look at the menu, obviously, and order what you want. So the kitchen is where they prepare the food, is like they think of it as like a computer or a server. So the menu is the API. It's the list of dishes that is listed on the menu. So along with the description of each dish, where you can specify what you like, you can say I want the pasta, or I want the noodles, or I want the burger, whatever you wish. So you tell the waiter that I want this. So waiter is the communicator between you that has the menu and the kitchen where they're preparing the food. So basically you don't need to know how to cook the food or what's happening in the kitchen. So the menu, which is the API, just provides you with a simple way to interact with the restaurant and get the food what you want. So API is just that. Whatever you want, you list it in the URL or whatever, and then it gets you the things that you want. And then you can display it in your application. Let's like weather data or like whatever you need, like movie information. So you basically say that I want this, specify it, and then you get it back. So in the same way, and it's called application programming interface, and it is like a menu for computers, and it has a set of rules and option that lets one program or system ask another program to do something to get some information. So let's carry on with our video. So how to start coding to create an API. So we're going to use Spring, and I have two ways so you can start alongside with me. Is firstly, you can go to this URL that is also listed underneath the video description, and you can create your own package that you can basically import. So it basically over here you initialize your like template code where you can basically list whatever dependencies you want before starting your Spring project. And Spring uses Java. So the prerequisites for this video is you need Java installed, and you also need MySQL, and whichever system you're using, whichever operating system you're using, you can use Windows, Linux, or Mac OS, and you can use your system and you can download it. And you can also download the graphical user interface where like this one, where you have the where you can basically list your queries and see what is in your database. So that's being said, we can now start our project. So you need, and also you need the code editor. So I'm going to go with IntelliJ, and I'm going to go with the community edition that is linked underneath the video. So if you want to download that, you can download and code alongside with me. So let's start. So firstly, over here, I have two ways. One, I have like template code hosted on my GitHub. I've provided the link below. You can just clone it and start. Another way, I'll show you how to create your own. So you can basically name whatever you want over here. Let's say movie location, and you can basically specify which Java version you are using. You can say I'm going to use Gradle. There are different ways. You can use Maven, and how to compile. You can even choose your different language, Kotlin or Groovy or whichever. So whatever is default, I'm going to use. I'm going to stick to that, and I'm going to say I want Lombok. So Lombok is basically reduces boilerplate code. So rather than just gives you in a simple annotation, it gets you the getters and setters. So it reduces your redundant code that you don't need, obviously. So Lombok can handle that. And we'll need Spring Web, which will allow us to create API or web application. And we'll also need the Spring JPA, which is data JPA, and the SQL driver. So MySQL driver. So let's see. And you can also come here and explore how they will look. So obviously, if I go back, um, I think I've got the wrong one. So we can go back and say driver, uh, and we'll choose MySQL driver. So if I come over here now, it should look like this. So our build.gradle will look like this, and you can simply download it from when you go over here. You can click on generate, and it will basically give you the movie location, and then you can just unzip it and open it up in your IntelliJ, or otherwise you can just clone it from here, downloads it, and it has everything. It also has the movie location SQL file, which we will need. So let's start the coding. So once we open our project, which I have also obviously got from my GitHub, so you can either do that or either do the other way that I've showed you from Spring Initializer. So let's get started and show you how the Spring Boot project looks like. So we have the build.gradle, which has the dependencies and has your Java version, and then we have our main structure where the code goes. So it's in the main. So over here we have the application itself. So the application runs, and then it basically runs, and then you can use localhost or whatever to interact with your application and see what your application looks like. So let's get started and show you. So firstly, I have commented out these two things. So let me uncomment them. One sec, and then you can do command slash to uncomment or command slash to again comment, and then just I'll rebuild it, and then I'll show you why I uncommented them. And now if I do that, my application should fail, because now it's asking for me to basically saying that there is no URL specified for the data source, for the database that I want to connect to. So these two things now, data JPA and my MySQL connector, they want, so if I uncomment them, they will want me to uh, specify a URL for the database that I want to connect and get the data from and display it in the application. So I don't have that. So let's create that. And over here, you'll see I have a file. Just do Command A or Control A, whichever operating system you're using it, and come into the MySQL and create a connection if you already have, and it should give you like a localhost 3306 connection, and then you can open it, and then we'll just paste our query. So I'm not going to go deep into SQL because this video is about Spring, but if you want to know about SQL, you can comment and let me know if you want to learn more about SQL. So which is a structured query language used in a database. So we'll just create like a database and then fill it up with dummy data about movies and cities, which movies were shot in which cities, and then we'll just create an application that basically gets the movies and the cities, and then show you how an API is created. That's the main reason of this video. So we can click on this thunder icon, which will execute this query, and then in the last I've said select from movies, which is a way in SQL to allow you to select anything from the movies, and star is you want to get everything from the movies, so it will get you all things. And then if I refresh over here, I'll have a new schema called movie locations. Now this is something I can connect in my Spring Boot application. So now if I go into my set in my README file, if you come out over here, and I've listed something over here like a code, which I need to place it in my application.properties, which is where you list the properties of your application. So we'll list the properties of our database. So I'll list, this is the name of our database. If you come over here, so movie locations, and as I showed you, if I can come over here, edit connection, this is the host, local host, and 3306 is the port. And my password is nothing. So if you're using a password, list it over here. And my username is root. And I'm using a dialect of MySQL 8. And I'm sure it will work with yours. And I'm just going to leave it like this. And now, hopefully, if I run the application, it should. And there's a simple way to run the application throughout. If you come over here, right click, and then do run, and now it runs without any error, because now it can find that URL, that where the movie location is in MySQL. So it's hitting the target, and now we can carry on with the rest of the video to create. So if we come into movie locations, we'll see what we have. So we have a movie column and a city column. So we'll need to replicate them in Java. So we need to create classes called, let's say, movie, and then a city class which has all these fields. So let's do that, which will be a model for our application. We don't have a view, so this will be like model, service, and controller. So we'll create three things, and also a repository which interfaces with the database and gets all the things that we need. So let's do that. firstly, I'll come over here and create 3 packages. I'll name it a model, and I'll create a new package called the service, actually the repository. I'll first name it the repository, and then I'll create a new package called the service, which will interact with the repository, and lastly, a controller. So let's go in the model and create our first class, which will be called a movie class. So we'll name it movies. I would suggest to name it movies, or keep it the same name. Otherwise, it will get mixed up. But I'm showing you how to do it another way. But so I'm naming it movie. So firstly, I'm gonna annotate it with as an entity. It is like an entity for a database. It has like a it's going to be a table, or so I'm gonna do an entity. Then I'll annotate it with data, which is the lombok that I told you, which will get us which will reduce the boilerplate code and grants us the access to use code from lombok, which I'll show you, and which is really cool. And I'll say I don't want any constructors. So now I'll firstly want to list the first item, which is the ID, and then I'll say private int, and it is movie underscore ID. And if you can see over here, we have movie underscore ID, movie name, and blah blah blah. And then we can come over here and then just list it over here. So I mean, this is like a different way to say it, right? So I mean, I'm just showing you the names. So and then we can say private string and movie name. I'm just gonna write everything down, and so I'm not gonna talk because this is simple. We'll just create the fields with their name, and we have description, we have poster URL, or otherwise you can also come in the README file and sorry, not in the README file. You can come into the movie locations, and then you can get it from here: description, poster URL, release year. So which is simple. I mean, I don't want you to write it all over again, so I'll delete this part, all of it. So and you make sure to annotate ID, because this is the primary key for the database. So we want to identify through movie ID, so we want to annotate it with ID. So private, and then you also want to do whatever. So it was the release year, I understand. So release year and private string. So these types obviously in the movie location are different. Int and so release year obviously is uh, an int over here. So one sec. If we go back and we'll follow along, private string director, and then private string, if we come over here, and then we can see release year is definitely an int, so we'll just change it to int. And private string director, and then we have the director, sorry, private string, and genre. Sorry, private string, so we're done with the movies. Now we don't need any getters or setters because Lombok will provide us using data. We'll create the second column called second class called the city, and the city class will also have the same things. So add entity and add data, add no args constructor. And now city is quite simple to do: private int city ID. And then we have add ID, if you don't forget that one. So, and private int, private string city name. So make sure they are the same name. So now we're done with it. We can go into the repository. So we'll create a new Java class. We'll use it as an interface, and we'll say movie repository. And then we'll say extends JP. Firstly, we'll uh, do it as a repository. And then we'll say JPA repository. Firstly, will come is the class movie, the model, and then we'll say integer, and then we'll leave it like that, just that, because it will do everything for you. Now it will get you all the things and whatever. It's just as simple as that. You don't need to do any implementation in there. So, and then same for the city. We'll use an interface, and we'll say city repository. So repository is really cool thing provided by Spring. You can just do add repository, and then it gives you a template. And if you want something complex, your own structured query, you can list it. You can create your own, but yeah, so it allows you to do that too. So JPA repository, city, and then integer. So now we have the repositories, and let's I'm just looking at the why there is like a, it says it's never used. Obviously we're going to use it, and then first you create like over here movie service, and then in the service we'll create like a new class called city service. So as you can see, I'm using the same names so to keep it coherent. So model, repository, and service. So now if we go into the movie service, remember to annotate it with the service at service, and then now we have it as now we'll auto wire the repository. We'll say private movie repository, and then movie repository, and then we'll create a function called public, and we'll say list uh, of movie. We'll say get all movies. So we can say return movie repository. So now if I come into movie repository and I do dot, I can do either find all. So as I told you, movie repository allows us like many things. It gives us access to many things to the database. So it allows find all, find by, and find by ID, count. So lots of stuff. But for now, I'm just gonna get all the things that are in the database. So I'm gonna say find all, and then I'm just gonna close it. And I'm gonna do the same for, so I'm gonna tell you what autowire means. So autowire, what autowire means is it initiates and like uh, creates like the object of that class for you without specifying the description whatever you need. So it instantiates the movie repository or city repository, and it creates an object, and then you can use that in your own class. So Spring provides an auto wire thing so that you're just wiring it in, and then you just use it without like assigning like a new to that. So it's really simple. And now if I come over here and I'll autowire the private city repository, and I'll say public, it will be a list. So list of the city, so the model that we created, and we'll say get all cities, and we'll say return city repository dot find all. So that's it. And let's go into the controller now, and we'll say movie controller. So now the controller is the interface that you will use or in your web URL. So you'll basically say that this is the whatever mapping that you want. We will define the mappings in here and how we will get the data back. So we'll define it in the controller. So the controller will listen for the endpoints. So let's do that. And firstly, when you come into the controller, you'll do add REST controller, and then you'll also need to define the mapping which you want to use to hit this, to basically start list active. So the controller wants to listen on that endpoint. So whenever that endpoint is hit, this controller will be hit, and this controller will get whichever function you want to return, whatever data you want to return. So you'll shortly understand what I mean. So I'll say request. So you'll do request mapping, and I'll do movies in the string, and I'll say whenever the slash movies is hit, come to this movie controller, and whatever is listed in there, just return me that. So I'll auto wire the service over here, and I'll say private movie service, not the controller, movie service, and then now I'll say get mapping. So you should be familiar with the HTTP, so the hypertext transfer protocol. There are different ways to interact with HTTP. You can do a get method, which gets you everything. There are post method where you basically provide something to the function like a body, so in like a sign up function or like a login function, or and then the login is instantiated in the body where we can basically access the username or password from you, and then get into the database and access the password and username if it matches, and then you allow you to go through the next page. So that's the post, and there's a put method. And the put is basically to update something in the database. So and then there's a delete, to delete something in the database. So however you want to do, you have to define whatever you want to do. So we're doing get because we're just retrieving something from the database. So I'm going to do public, and I'm going to do response entity. Response entity allows you to return something in an HTTP way, and I'm going to do list of a movie that I want to return in the response entity, and then it's if I am not if I'll just say get all the, I'll just keep it camel case, so get all the movies, and then I just need to import this java.util, and then I'll say return response entity will return like an OK 200. So an OK is, so there are different status code. So for example, when you go to a database, sometimes you get a 404 that something is not found. So something, when you go onto a page, let's say like you've logged in successfully, so the backend returns a 200. So that redirects you to the next page and has like your session. So OK is 200. So there are different status code for HTTP, and I'll list it out in the description so you can learn more about them. So OK is 200, and then we'll just do movie service. We'll say get all movies. So, and let's rerun our application. Now, if we open localhost and do /movies, so currently it comes up with an empty array. So we should go back into an application and see why it comes up as an empty array. It must not be hitting the endpoint. We should always come and debug and see. And I know why it's doing this, because as you remember, I told you to name your database the same as, like, this is movies, so it should be called movies. So it gets confused, it cannot find the entity or whatever. So we'll just use something called table, and then list the name of our database. We'll say name equals movies, and then if we rerun it, hopefully it should find it and come back to us. And yeah, so now if I hit the /movies, it's coming back with this information from the database. And for example, if your data is not looking like mine, you can you can download JSON formatter, which allows to format stuff in Chrome. So I'll say JSON formatter, and then you can just download it. And then I've downloaded it, and it's really useful. So and then you can see how many users have basically downloaded it. So it will really help you to see how the API is returning the code. So this kind of data can be used by a front end of your application, which is in JavaScript, React, or something, and create like a beautiful web application that lists the movies, and then you have the URL. You can use containers. So this is like something from the database. You can create like some where you can add data to your database, and this is whatever is in your database. So if you can click on these things, you can get movies, and so it has all the information. We can now see the /cities, which we haven't created. So it should get us like a white label error page, which because it cannot find that page. And as I told you, there's different status code 404, and it couldn't find that. So let's go back and do the same for our city. So if I'm not wrong, it should be cities, and we'll just do an entity, and we'll say cities over here, and we'll go back in our controller, and we'll say city controller, and we'll say the same things as we used. If you can remember, we use the REST controller annotation, and we use the get mapping, and you can list anything over here like cities or whatever you want. You can use whatever you want, and you need to use request mapping over here. Get mapping comes on top of the function, so my bad. And then you have cities over here, and then whatever you want to name, you can just name, because as you come into the movie controller, I told you I use it as movies, and then when I use movies over here, this is the endpoint, and it hits the controller. It comes into the controller and says, where is the function that I need? So get mapping to this function, and then it returns all the thing from in the database. So let's replicate the same thing, and then we'll just say hotwire the service. So private, what will it be? City service and city service. And then we'll just do get mapping, which we did earlier. And then we'll need to define a public response entity, and then we'll just do response entity and list of the city. And there are many other functions that you can return. You can get something by the ID, or get something by your movie name, or like whatever you want. We can create as many functions as we can, but I'm just showing you how to do a simple RESTful API. So get all cities, and then we'll just return the response entity of okay. And we can actually go and show you how many there are. So they're okay, they're bad requests, not found, whatever we want to do. We can say, well, actually try, we'll mess up with this one to show you what I mean. So I'll say not found. So not found, and then in the not found, I'll say city service. I hope this works. And I'll say get all cities. It won't work, I think, this one, because it doesn't need anything. So I'll stick to okay, and then I'll just say rerun it, and then I'll come into the city, and then it gets me the city. We can also map the city with the movie, whichever movie it was shot, but we'll need to create another column in the database. So this was simple RESTful APIs, which we can create and then show you how to basically work with them, and then you can use them in your different application and use it as a microservice. So this can also be used as a microservice, just like a backend. It doesn't have a view or something, returns the data, or we can actually call like a weather API from Spring and basically store the data in our databases from them. So let's say like this, we'll have a new mapping called weather, and then weather mapping will have something we want, we'll get whatever information we want to get from weather, or like a weather and the name of the city we want, and it will get us the data from that. So it's just like a RESTful API, which is really brilliant in Spring, that it allows us to do it in a short amount of time and removes the logic away and hides it away, and then you can just use annotations and stuff and make your beautiful application that you want. So this was a simple tutorial to how to create RESTful APIs. I hope you learned and enjoyed the video. And if you want to learn anything more, just let me know. I have brilliant bunch of ideas that I want to create and show you and make you learn new things and help you grow in your own careers. And whatever support you need, just let me know in the comment section. I'm loving the support and the community comments, whatever they're showing me in the other videos. So I'm really thankful for your support and thank you for your help, and looking forward to talk in our next video. Thank you and bye for now. Ciao.